The flour hit Dexter Thornton's charcoal suit with enough force to leave a white handprint across his chest, and he watched the woman responsible freeze mid-reach, her green eyes going wide with horror as she realized what she had just done. "Oh God," she whispered, clutching the measuring cup like it might somehow reverse time. "I am so sorry." Dexter looked down at his ruined Tom Ford suit, then back up at the woman who had just assaulted him with baking ingredients, and felt something unexpected crack through his usual composure. She looked absolutely devastated, her cheeks flushing crimson as other contestants in the community center's charity bake-off turned to stare. "It's fine," he said, brushing at the flour and only succeeding in grinding it deeper into the fabric. "Really? It's not fine. That suit probably costs more than my car." She grabbed a towel and stepped closer, dabbing at his chest with frantic movements. "I was trying to reach the vanilla extract on the top shelf, and the flour just went everywhere, and you were right there, and I'm so sorry." He caught her wrist gently, stilling her movements. "Breathe. It's just a suit." She looked up at him, and he noticed the small scar above her right eyebrow, the way her hair was already escaping its ponytail even though the competition had not even started yet. She smelled like vanilla and coffee, and when she pulled her hand back, he found himself missing the contact. "I'm Diana Ellis," she said, still looking mortified. "Your baking partner for the day, apparently, though after this you might want to request a trade. Dexter Thornton." He extended his hand and she shook it, her grip firm despite her obvious embarrassment. "And I don't want to trade. You say that now. Wait until you see my decorating skills, or lack thereof." She managed a small smile, tucking a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "Full disclosure, I signed up for this because my best friend dared me. I own a small bakery, so she thought it would be funny to see me compete in an amateur bake-off. The joke's on her, though, because I actually take this stuff seriously. You own a bakery, Sweet and Savory on Maple Street. We specialize in custom cakes and pastries. It's small, but it's mine." There was pride in her voice, the kind that came from building something from nothing. "What about you? What brings a guy in a Tom Ford suit to a Saturday morning bake-off?" Dexter hesitated. He had gotten used to the way people's attitudes shifted when they learned he was the CEO of Thornton Industries, one of the largest manufacturing companies on the East Coast. His assistant had signed him up for this charity event as a mandatory public relations exercise, something to make him seem more approachable, more human. The company had been in the news recently for their expansion plans, and his board thought community involvement would soften his image. "My assistant thought I needed to get out more," he said, which was not exactly a lie. "Apparently I work too much." "Well, at least you're honest about being voluntold." Diana laughed, and the sound did something strange to his chest. "Come on, partner. Let's get set up before I cause any more property damage." Their station was in the middle of the community center's main hall, surrounded by 9 other pairs of competitors. The challenge was simple: create a dessert in 3 hours that incorporated local ingredients and told a story about their community. The winner would receive a donation to their chosen charity, and all proceeds from the event would go to the local food bank. Diana immediately started organizing their workspace with the efficiency of someone who had done this 1,000 times. She lined up measuring cups, sorted through ingredients, and pulled out a notebook covered in sketches and notes. "So I was thinking we could do a deconstructed apple pie situation," she said, flipping through pages covered in her neat handwriting. "We could make individual tart shells, fill them with caramelized local apples, top them with a brown sugar crumble, and serve them with homemade vanilla ice cream." The apples represent the orchards just outside town, and pie is basically the most community-oriented dessert there is. Dexter stared at her. You made plans. Of course I made plans. This is a competition. She looked at him with genuine confusion. Didn't you prepare? I thought we would just make brownies or something. Diana's expression shifted through several emotions before landing on determined amusement. Okay, that's fine. I have enough ideas for both of us. Can you follow instructions? I run a company with 5,000 employees. I think I can handle measuring sugar. Running a company and baking are two completely different skill sets, Dexter. She said his name like she was testing how it felt in her mouth, and he liked it far more than he should. But I appreciate the confidence. Let's start with the tart dough. I'll walk you through it. What followed was 3 hours of controlled chaos that Dexter had not experienced since his early days building Thornton Industries from his father's failing manufacturing plant. Diana moved through the workspace like a conductor leading an orchestra, her hands sure and steady as she demonstrated techniques and corrected his mistakes with patience he had not expected. No, you have to fold it gently, she said, guiding his hands as he worked butter into flour. You're not trying to murder it. Think of it like you're tucking in a baby. I've never tucked in a baby. Then think of it like you're handling something precious that might break if you're too rough. She stepped closer, her shoulder brushing his arm as she showed him the proper motion. See? Gentle but firm. He was trying very hard not to think about her hands on his, or the way she bit her lower lip when she concentrated, or how she had flour on her cheek that she kept missing when she tried to wipe her face. You're a good teacher, he said, surprising himself with the observation. Diana glanced up, those green eyes catching his. You're not a terrible student, a little heavy-handed with the butter, but we can work with it. They fell into a rhythm after that. Diana handled the more complex elements, the caramelized apples that filled the kitchen with the scent of cinnamon and brown sugar, the delicate ice cream that required constant attention. Dexter focused on the tasks she assigned him, the tart shells that he pressed into molds with increasingly steady hands, the crumble topping that he mixed until Diana declared it perfect. Taste this, she said at one point, holding up a spoon of the apple filling. She blew on it to cool it down, then lifted it to his mouth. The intimacy of the gesture caught him off guard. Diana seemed to realize it at the same moment, her cheeks flushing, but she did not pull away. Dexter leaned forward and tasted the filling, the sweetness of the apples balanced perfectly with the warmth of the spices. That's incredible, he said honestly. Yeah, she looked pleased, almost shy. I adjusted the recipe last night, added a little cardamom to make it more interesting. It works. They were standing close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her green eyes, close enough that he could smell her vanilla scent mixing with the sugar and spices around them. Someone at the next station dropped a pan, and the moment broke. Diana stepped back, returning to her work with focused intensity. The final hour was a blur of assembly and plating. Diana had brought special serving dishes from her bakery, small slate tiles that made their individual tarts look like something from a high-end restaurant. She arranged everything with an artist's eye, adding a garnish of fresh mint and a drizzle of caramel sauce that caught the light. "What do you think?" she asked, stepping back to survey their work. Dexter looked at the 10 perfect tarts arranged on their table, each one a small masterpiece of technique and presentation. "I think we might actually have a chance." "Don't jinx it," Diana said, but she was grinning now, the stress of the competition giving way to satisfaction. She had flour in her hair, a smudge of caramel on her collarbone, and she looked absolutely beautiful. The judges made their way through the stations, tasting and taking notes. When they reached Dexter and Diana's table, Diana stood up straighter, her hands clasped in front of her. Dexter found himself wanting to reach out and take her hand, to share some of his confidence, but he kept his arms at his sides. The head judge was Margaret Chen, a renowned pastry chef who had recently opened a restaurant downtown. She took a bite of their tart, her expression giving nothing away. The other two judges followed suit, and the silence stretched out painfully. "This is exceptional work," Margaret finally said. "The pastry is perfectly tender, the filling has a complexity that surprises me, and the presentation is restaurant quality. Well done." Diana exhaled slowly, and Dexter felt his own tension release. They had done it. They had actually done it. The judges finished their rounds, and everyone was asked to gather while the winners were announced. Third place went to a pair of college students who had made an elaborate chocolate sculpture. Second place went to two elderly women who had been baking together for 40 years. And first place, Margaret announced, goes to Station 5. Dexter and Diana, congratulations. Diana grabbed his arm without thinking, her face lighting up with pure joy. Dexter found himself grinning back at her, caught up in her enthusiasm. They went up to accept their ribbon and the oversized check for $5,000 that would go to Diana's chosen charity, a literacy program for underprivileged kids. "We won," Diana said, still holding his arm as they returned to their station. "We actually won." "You won," Dexter corrected. "I just followed orders." "No, we won. You were amazing, Dexter. For someone who was planning to make brownies, you really came through." She was practically bouncing on her toes, and without thinking, she threw her arms around him in a quick hug. Dexter went still for a moment, then carefully hugged her back. She fit against him perfectly, her head tucking under his chin, and he caught himself wanting to hold on longer than appropriate. Diana seemed to realize what she had done and stepped back quickly. "Sorry. I get excited about winning." "Don't apologize. I get it." They started cleaning their station, working side by side to wash dishes and pack up supplies. The community center was slowly emptying out as other contestants left, but neither of them seemed in a hurry to go. "So," Diana said, drying a mixing bowl with more attention than it required. "This was fun." "It was. Maybe we could do it again sometime. I mean, not another bake-off necessarily, but—" She trailed off, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. Dexter took the bowl from her hands and set it down. "Diana, are you trying to ask me out?" Her eyes widened. No, I mean yes. Maybe. God, I'm usually better at this," she laughed, running a hand through her flour-dusted hair. "Yes, I'm asking if you'd like to get dinner with me sometime. As a thank you for being such a good sport about the flour incident and the competition and everything." "I'd like that," Dexter said, "but not as a thank you, as a date." "A date," Diana repeated, her smile growing. "Yeah, okay, a date works." They exchanged numbers, and Dexter found himself reluctant to leave even as the community center staff started turning off lights and stacking chairs. Diana walked him to the parking lot, still wearing her flour-covered apron, and stopped when she saw his car. "That's yours?" she asked, staring at the black Mercedes. "Yes." "Okay, so you definitely weren't kidding about the Tom Ford suit being expensive." She looked at him with new curiosity. "What exactly do you do, Dexter?" He could have deflected, could have given her a vague answer and put off this conversation for another day. But something about Diana made him want to be honest, even if it risked changing how she saw him. "I'm the CEO of Thornton Industries. We manufacture industrial equipment and building materials." Diana blinked. "Thornton Industries. Like the Thornton Industries that's in the news all the time, the one that's worth billions, that's the one." She processed this for a moment, her expression unreadable. "So when you said your assistant thought you needed to get out more," She meant because you're some big-shot CEO who probably works 100 hours a week. Something like that. Huh? Diana crossed her arms, studying him. Well, that's going to make for an interesting first date. Relief flooded through him. You still want to go? Of course I still want to go. You're not getting out of this that easily, Thornton. She poked him in the chest, right where the flour stain still marked his suit. Fair warning, though, I'm going to judge you very harshly on your restaurant choices. I have high standards when it comes to food. I'll keep that in mind. They stood there for another moment, neither quite ready to leave. Finally, Diana stepped back and waved. Text me, soon, don't make me wait. I won't. Dexter watched her walk to her car, a beat-up Honda Civic that had seen better days, and felt something shift in his chest. He had not expected this when he dragged himself out of bed this morning. He had not expected Diana Ellis at all. He texted her before he even pulled out of the parking lot. Tomorrow night, I know a place. Her response came within seconds. Tomorrow's perfect, but it better be a good place, CEO. I'm trusting you here. Dexter smiled at his phone like a teenager and drove home feeling lighter than he had in years. The restaurant he chose was Marcello's, a small Italian place tucked away in the historic district that most people did not know about. It was the kind of place that did not advertise, where reservations were made months in advance, and where the owner personally greeted every guest. Dexter had invested in the restaurant years ago when Marcello was struggling to keep the doors open, and their friendship had given him access to the best table in the house whenever he wanted it. Diana was waiting outside when he arrived, and Dexter's breath caught at the sight of her. She wore a dark green dress that matched her eyes, her hair falling in loose waves around her shoulders. She had traded her casual confidence for something more nervous, shifting her weight from foot to foot as she watched for him. Hi, she said when he approached, her smile uncertain. Is this okay? I wasn't sure how fancy to go. You look beautiful, Dexter said, meaning it completely. The tension in her shoulders eased. You clean up pretty nice yourself. No flour stains this time. I left my flower-attracting suit at home. Marcello himself greeted them at the door, his weathered face breaking into a warm smile when he saw Dexter. Dex, my friend, it's been too long. His gaze shifted to Diana, his smile growing. And you brought a beautiful lady. Come, come, I have the perfect table for you. He led them to a corner table with soft lighting and a view of the restaurant's small garden. Fresh flowers sat in a simple vase, and candles flickered between them. It was romantic without being overwhelming, intimate without feeling presumptuous. So you're friends with the owner, Diana said once they were seated, amusement dancing in her eyes. Of course you are. Marcello's a good man. He makes the best osso buco on the East Coast. Let me guess, you invested in the restaurant. Dexter raised an eyebrow. How did you know? Because that's what guys like you do, right? Find struggling businesses and turn them into successes. There was no judgment in her voice, just curiosity. I looked you up last night, after you told me who you were. You're kind of a big deal, Dexter Thornton. Does that bother you? Diana considered the question, taking a sip of the water the server had poured. I don't know yet. Ask me again at the end of the night. He appreciated her honesty. They ordered, falling into easy conversation as they waited for their food. Diana told him about her bakery, how she had worked 3 jobs to save enough money to lease the space, how she had spent 6 months renovating it herself with the help of YouTube videos and determination. My parents thought I was crazy, she said, breaking off a piece of bread. They wanted me to go to college, get a stable job, play it safe. But I've known since I was 10 years old that I wanted to own my own bakery. My grandmother taught me to bake, and it was the only thing that ever made sense to me. Is your grandmother still around? Diana's expression softened. She passed away 5 years ago, right before I signed the lease on the bakery. I like to think she would have been proud." "I'm sure she would have been," Dexter said. "What you've built, doing it on your own, that takes courage," says the guy who runs a billion-dollar company. "I inherited a failing manufacturing plant from my father and had to convince a board of directors who thought I was too young and too inexperienced to lead. It wasn't courage, Diana. It was desperation and stubbornness in equal measure." She leaned forward, her eyes searching his face. "How old were you?" 23, fresh out of business school and completely in over my head. "And now you're what, 32, 33, 34, 34 and running an empire. That's impressive." Diana sat back as their food arrived, but her gaze stayed on him. "But it also sounds lonely." The observation hit closer than Dexter expected. "It can be." They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the food as excellent as Dexter had promised. Diana closed her eyes after her first bite of risotto, a small sound of pleasure escaping her. "Okay, I take back any doubts I had about your restaurant choices," she said. "This is incredible. Wait until you try the tiramisu." "There's tiramisu?" Diana's eyes lit up. "Dexter, you're spoiling me, and this is only the first date. Good, you deserve to be spoiled." The words came out more seriously than he intended, and he saw Diana's cheeks flush in the candlelight. She looked down at her plate, then back up at him with something vulnerable in her expression. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Anything?" "Why did you say yes? To the date, I mean." "You could probably go out with anyone you want. Models, actresses, other CEOs. Why say yes to the baker who assaulted you with flour?" Dexter set down his fork and met her gaze directly. "Because in 3 hours of working together, you made me feel more alive than I've felt in years. Because you take things seriously and throw yourself into them completely, even when they're just for fun. Because when you smile, your whole face lights up, and I wanted to see that again." He paused. "And because you didn't care who I was, you just saw me." Diana's breath caught audibly. "Dexter." "Too much?" "No," she said quickly. "No, not too much, just unexpected. In a good way." They finished dinner talking about everything and nothing, the conversation flowing as easily as it had in the community center. Diana told him about her plans to expand the bakery, maybe add a small cafe section where people could sit and have coffee with their pastries. Dexter found himself offering advice without meaning to, his business mind automatically analyzing her ideas and offering solutions. "Sorry," he said, catching himself mid-suggestion about supply chain management. "I'm doing the CEO thing, aren't I?" "A little bit," Diana admitted. "But I don't mind. It's actually helpful. I never took business classes, so I'm kind of figuring it out as I go. I could help you with that." "If you want." Diana studied him across the table, something complicated in her expression. "Would you be helping me as a friend or as a billionaire who invests in struggling businesses?" The question was fair, and Dexter took a moment to answer honestly. "As someone who wants to see you succeed because you're brilliant and talented and deserve it. The business advice is free, no strings, no expectations." "No strings," Diana repeated softly. "Okay, I'd like that." Marcello brought out the tiramisu himself, setting down 2 plates with a knowing smile. "Dessert for the lovely couple, on the house tonight." "Marcello, you don't have to do that," Dexter started, but the older man waved him off. "You do so much for me, Dex. Let me do this small thing." He winked at Diana. "Besides, I like seeing my friend happy. You make him smile." After Marcello left, Diana picked up her fork and pointed it at Dexter playfully. "So I make you smile, huh, apparently. Good, because you make me smile too. Even when you're trying to murder butter like it personally offended you." They shared the tiramisu, and Dexter found himself watching Diana more than eating, cataloging the small details that made her fascinating. The way she hummed softly when something tasted good, how she gestured with her hands when she got excited, the unconscious grace in her movements that spoke to years of working with her hands. Walking Diana to her car afterward felt too much like an ending when Dexter wanted a beginning. She unlocked the Civic and turned to face him, keys jangling in her hand. "Thank you for tonight," she said. "For dinner, for the conversation, for not being weird about the whole billionaire thing. Thank you for giving me a chance despite the billionaire thing." Diana laughed, and then without warning she stepped closer and kissed him. It was brief, just a soft press of her lips against his, but it sent electricity through Dexter's entire body. She pulled back before he could respond, her eyes dancing with mischief. "I'll see you soon, Dexter Thornton." When are you free?" "Whenever you want me to be." That seemed to please her. "Tomorrow, come by the bakery in the morning, around 7. I'll make you breakfast. I'll be there." Dexter watched her drive away, his lips still tingling from that brief kiss. He stood in the parking lot like an idiot for a full minute before he remembered he had his own car to get to. He was at the bakery at 6:45 the next morning, unable to wait any longer. Sweet and Savory was a small corner shop with big windows that let in the early light and a hand-painted sign that spoke to care and attention. Through the glass, he could see Diana moving around inside, her hair pulled back in a bun, wearing jeans and a t-shirt covered by a pink apron. She looked up when he knocked, surprise crossing her face before it melted into a smile. She unlocked the door and pulled it open, flour already dusting her forearms. "You're early. I'm eager. Come on in. I'm just pulling the first batch of croissants out." She led him into the bakery, and the smell hit him like a physical thing. Warm bread and butter and sugar creating an atmosphere that felt like comfort itself. The space was small but perfectly organized, every surface clean despite the obvious work happening. A glass display case waited empty to be filled, and behind it was a kitchen visible through a large window, professional equipment gleaming under bright lights. "Have a seat," Diana said, gesturing to one of the 4 small tables near the window. "Coffee, please." She poured him a cup from a pot that looked like it had been waiting for him, and brought over a plate with a still warm croissant, a small bowl of fresh strawberries, and a pastry he did not recognize. "The croissant is my grandmother's recipe," Diana explained, sitting down across from him with her own coffee. "The pastry is something I've been working on, a combination of a Danish and a cream puff. I'm still perfecting it." Dexter bit into the croissant and nearly groaned. It was perfect, flaky and buttery with just the right amount of sweetness. "This is incredible." "Yeah." Diana looked pleased, watching him eat with the intensity of someone who genuinely cared about his reaction. "Try the other one. I need honest feedback." The experimental pastry was equally delicious, a delicate shell filled with vanilla cream and topped with a light glaze. "Diana, this is amazing. What are you still perfecting?" "The ratio of cream to pastry. I think it's a little too heavy on the cream." She broke off a piece and tasted it critically. "Yeah, definitely too much cream." "I disagree, but I'm also not the professional baker." They sat in the quiet bakery as morning light slowly filled the space, talking and eating like they had known each other for years instead of days. Diana told him about her regulars, the old man who came in every morning for a black coffee and a plain scone, the young mother who ordered elaborate birthday cakes with designs Diana had to teach herself from scratch. "I love it," she said simply. "Even when it's hard, even when I'm working 16-hour days and my feet hurt and I can't remember the last time I took a day off. I love it." "When was the last time you took a day off?" Dexter asked. Diana thought about it. 6 months ago, maybe 7. I went to my best friend's wedding. That's too long, says the CEO, who probably works even more than I do. She had a point. Dexter could not remember his last real day off either, the kind where he did not check his email or take calls or review reports. We're both terrible at this, aren't we? Absolutely terrible. Diana grinned. But at least we're terrible together. The words hung between them, full of possibility and promise. Dexter reached across the table and took her hand, her fingers lacing through his with easy familiarity. "Go out with me again," he said. "When? Tonight? Tomorrow?" "Whenever you can." Diana squeezed his hand. "I close the bakery at 6, pick me up at 7, done." A timer went off in the kitchen, and Diana reluctantly pulled her hand away. "That's the muffins, I have to go." "Can I help?" She paused halfway to standing. "You want to help me bake?" "I had fun at the competition, and I'm already here." Diana's smile could have powered the entire city. "Okay, CEO, let's see if yesterday was a fluke or if you actually learned something." What followed were the most enjoyable 3 hours Dexter had spent in recent memory. Diana put him to work mixing batters and filling muffin tins while she worked on more complex projects, moving between tasks with practiced efficiency. She sang softly while she worked, off-key and unself-conscious, and corrected his technique with patient humor. "You're getting better at the folding thing," she said, checking his work on a batch of blueberry muffin batter. "See, I knew you weren't hopeless." High praise from a perfectionist. "I'm not a perfectionist," Diana protested. Then, at his look, she laughed. "Okay, fine, I'm a perfectionist. But only about baking. Everything else in my life is a disaster." The bakery opened at 8, and a steady stream of customers began flowing through. Dexter stayed in the back, watching through the kitchen window as Diana transformed into a gracious host, remembering names and orders, chatting easily with regulars while efficiently handling the morning rush. Around 10, he reluctantly checked his phone and saw 17 missed calls from his assistant. Reality crashed back in, reminding him that he had a company to run and meetings he was probably missing. "I have to go," he said, finding Diana between customers. "Work crisis." Of course. If she was disappointed, she hid it well. "Thank you for this morning. It was nice having company. Thank you for breakfast and for letting me help." He wanted to kiss her but was aware of the customers on the other side of the window. "I'll see you tonight at 7. I'll be ready." Dexter made it to his office by 11. And spent the rest of the day dealing with a supplier crisis that required his immediate attention. But even as he negotiated contracts and made decisions that would affect thousands of employees, part of his mind stayed in that warm bakery, watching Diana work with her capable hands and easy smile. His assistant, Rebecca, cornered him at 3 in the afternoon with an expression that meant trouble. "You missed the board meeting this morning," she said without preamble. "I sent Thompson in my place." "The board doesn't want Thompson. They want you." "Especially since we're in the middle of the expansion discussions." Rebecca crossed her arms. "Where were you?" "Out, out," she repeated flatly. "You missed a crucial board meeting to be out." "Yes." Rebecca studied him for a long moment, her sharp eyes taking in details he probably should have hidden better. "This is about the bake-off, isn't it? You met someone. Maybe." Her expression shifted from annoyed to curious. "Dexter Thornton, workaholic extraordinaire, met someone who made him blow off a board meeting. I need details." "No. Come on, you owe me. I'm the one who signed you up for that thing in the first place." She had a point. Dexter leaned back in his chair and allowed himself a small smile. "Her name is Diana. She owns a bakery. We won the competition. And I'm seeing her again tonight." Rebecca's face broke into a genuine grin. "Good. It's about time you had a life outside this office, but Dexter, the board is getting antsy. You need to smooth things over before they start making it a problem." "I'll handle it." He did handle it, calling an emergency meeting with the board's key members and bringing them updated projections that showed the expansion was ahead of schedule and under budget. By the time he finished his presentation, they were too pleased with the numbers to care that he had missed one meeting. It was 6:30 when he finally left the office, giving him just enough time to go home, shower, and change before picking up Diana. He was pulling up to the bakery at 7 exactly and found Diana waiting outside, wearing jeans and a soft blue sweater that made her eyes even more striking. "Where are we going?" she asked as she climbed into his car. "It's a surprise." "I hate surprises." "No, you don't." Diana laughed. "Okay, fine. I love surprises, but I reserve the right to be nervous about them." Dexter drove them out of the city, heading toward the countryside as the sun began to set. Diana watched the landscape change outside her window, curiosity evident in her expression, but trusting enough not to demand answers. He pulled off the main road onto a dirt path that led through an orchard, the trees heavy with late-season apples. At the end of the path was a clearing with a perfect view of the valley below, the city lights just beginning to twinkle in the distance. "Dexter," Diana breathed, taking in the view. "This is beautiful." He got out and opened the trunk, pulling out a blanket and a picnic basket he had had his personal chef prepare. Diana helped him spread the blanket on the grass, her movements careful and wondering. "A picnic," she said. "You brought me on a picnic. You mentioned yesterday that you loved eating outside, and I thought after spending all day in the bakery, you might appreciate being somewhere different." Diana sat down on the blanket and looked up at him with something that made his heart skip. "You listened." "Of course I listened." They ate as the sun set, the basket full of gourmet sandwiches, fresh fruit, cheese, and a bottle of wine that Dexter opened with a corkscrew. Diana asked him about his day, and he found himself telling her about the board meeting and the supplier crisis with more honesty than he usually shared. "It must be exhausting," she said, pouring them both more wine. "Having all those people depending on you all the time, never being able to just turn it off." "It is," Dexter admitted, "but it's what I know, it's what I'm good at." "It doesn't have to be the only thing you're good at, though." Diana leaned back on her hands, looking out at the view. "You were good at baking yesterday. You're good at this, at planning thoughtful dates and making me feel special. You're allowed to be more than just your job, Dexter. Are you more than just your bakery? That's different." "How?" Diana was quiet for a moment. "Because my bakery is my choice. I built it because I wanted to, not because I had to. You inherited your company, and yeah, you grew it into something incredible, but did you ever choose it? Or did it just become your life by default?" The question hit somewhere deep and uncomfortable. Dexter had never really thought about it that way, had never questioned whether he wanted to run Thornton Industries, or if it had simply been expected of him. "I don't know," he said honestly. Diana reached over and took his hand. "Maybe that's something worth figuring out." They lay back on the blanket as full darkness fell, the stars emerging above them in a display that was impossible to see in the city. Diana pointed out the few constellations she knew, making up stories about the ones she did not. "That one there," she said, gesturing at a random cluster of stars. "That's the Great Spatula. Legend says it was used by the first baker to flip the world's largest pancake." "The Great Spatula," Dexter repeated, trying not to laugh. "It's a very serious constellation. Show some respect." He rolled onto his side to face her, propping himself up on one elbow. Diana turned her head to look at him, her expression soft in the starlight. "Thank you for this," she said quietly. "I didn't realize how much I needed it. Thank you for coming with me." "Dexter, I would have gone anywhere with you, even if it was just to sit in your car in a parking lot. I just like being with you." He kissed her then, properly this time, sinking into the warmth of her mouth and the way she sighed against him. Her hand came up to cup his cheek, and they stayed like that for a long moment, the world narrowing to just the two of them and the blanket and the stars overhead. When they finally pulled apart, Diana was smiling. "We should probably head back before I fall asleep out here." That would be a terrible second date ending. "The worst," she agreed. Dexter drove her home, a small apartment above a bookstore near downtown. Diana invited him up for coffee, and he accepted even though they both knew it was not really about the coffee. Her apartment was tiny but cozy, full of mismatched furniture and plants that somehow thrived despite the limited space. Bookshelves lined one wall, stuffed with cookbooks and novels and what looked like every baking magazine ever published. "It's not much," Diana said, suddenly self-conscious. "But it's home. It's perfect. It's very you." She made them coffee in a French press, and they sat on her small couch talking until well past midnight. Dexter learned that Diana had a younger brother in medical school, that her favorite movie was Ratatouille because it understood the artistry of cooking, that she had always wanted to travel to Paris but never had the time or money. "I'll take you," Dexter said without thinking. Diana looked at him over her coffee mug. "What? To Paris? I'll take you. We can visit all the bakeries and patisseries you want. Dexter, we've been on 2 dates. So I know what I want, and I want to see Paris with you." She set down her mug carefully. "You can't just say things like that." "Why not?" "Because it's terrifying. Because I'm falling for you way too fast, and I don't know what to do with that. Because you're this successful CEO with a billion-dollar company, and I'm a baker who lives above a bookstore and eats cereal for dinner more often than I should admit." Dexter set down his own mug and took her hands. "Diana, I don't care about any of that. I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since you assaulted me with flour. You make me want things I didn't know I was missing. You make me want to take days off and eat breakfast in bakeries and watch the sunset from random orchards. I know it's fast, but I also know how I feel." "How do you feel?" "Like I've been waiting for you without knowing it." Diana's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "That's a really good line, Thornton." "It's not a line. It's the truth." She kissed him then, deep and urgent, and they stayed on that couch for another hour, talking and kissing and slowly understanding that something significant was happening between them. It was 2 in the morning when Dexter finally forced himself to leave. Diana walked him to the door, wearing one of his sweaters that she had stolen at some point during the evening. "When can I see you again?" he asked. "Tomorrow?" "I mean today, technically. Come by after I close the bakery." "I'll make you dinner. You've been baking all day. Let me take you out." "No," Diana said firmly. "I want to cook for you. Real food, not pastries. Let me do this." "Okay, I'll be here at 7. It's a date." Dexter made himself walk away, though every instinct told him to stay. He drove home through empty streets, his mind replaying every moment of the evening, every touch and word and smile. He was falling in love with Diana Ellis, and the realization should have terrified him. But instead, it just felt right. The next few weeks fell into a pattern that felt both new and comfortable. Dexter would stop by the bakery in the mornings before work, helping Diana with prep work and stealing kisses between batches of croissants. They would have dinner together most evenings, alternating between restaurants Dexter chose and meals Diana cooked in her tiny apartment kitchen. He met her best friend Jessica, a sharp-witted lawyer who interrogated him like he was on trial before declaring him acceptable. Diana met Rebecca, who pulled her aside and told her to keep making Dexter happy because he was less of a nightmare to work for these days. They took weekend trips to nearby towns, exploring farmers' markets and small bakeries. Diana always taking notes and photos of things that inspired her. Dexter found himself relaxing in ways he had not managed in years, laughing more, worrying less, being present in moments instead of always thinking 3 steps ahead. 1 month after the bake-off, Diana brought up the expansion plans for her bakery. They were in her apartment, Diana cooking dinner while Dexter sat at her small kitchen table reviewing the business proposal she had put together. "This is good," he said, flipping through pages of market research and financial projections. "Really good, Diana. You've clearly put a lot of thought into this. But," she turned from the stove, wooden spoon in hand, "but you're underestimating your startup costs. Equipment alone is going to run you more than you've budgeted, and you need to factor in at least 6 months of reduced revenue while you're renovating." Diana's face fell. "So I can't do it." "I didn't say that. I said you need to adjust your numbers." Dexter pulled out his phone and started making notes. "What if you phase the expansion? Start with the cafe section, get that up and running and generating revenue, then tackle the kitchen expansion in 6 months. "That could work," Diana said slowly, coming to look over his shoulder. "But I'd still need more capital than I have. Take out a business loan. Your current numbers are solid and any bank would be happy to loan to you. Banks make me nervous." "Then let me invest." Diana straightened immediately. "No, Diana, no, Dexter, we've talked about this. I don't want your money." They had talked about it multiple times, and every time Diana shut down the conversation before it could really start. Dexter understood her need to maintain independence, but he also saw how hard she was working, how much she was sacrificing to build her dream alone. "It wouldn't be charity," he said carefully. "It would be a legitimate business investment. You'd pay me back with interest, just like a bank loan. It's different and you know it." "Why?" "Because we're dating." "Because I need to do this on my own," Diana said, frustration creeping into her voice. "I need to know that I built this, that it's mine, that I didn't get it because I was sleeping with someone rich." The words stung more than they should have. "Is that what you think people would say?" "I think it's what I would worry about. I think I need to prove to myself that I can do this without help." She softened slightly, seeing his expression. "Dexter, I know you want to help. I know you're coming from a good place, but this is important to me. Please understand." He did understand, even if he didn't like it. "Okay, no investment, but will you at least let me help you refine the business plan? No money, just advice." Diana considered this, then nodded. "Advice I can accept." They spent the rest of the evening reworking her projections. Dexter sharing everything he knew about business expansion, while Diana took notes and asked questions. By the time they finished, she had a solid plan that was actually achievable without Dexter's money, just more time and careful budgeting. "Thank you," she said, kissing him softly, "for understanding, and for helping without trying to take over." "I'm learning," Dexter said, slowly. 2 months into their relationship, Dexter's mother decided to visit. Eleanor Thornton was a force of nature, elegant and sharp and deeply protective of her only son. She called him on a Monday morning to announce she would be arriving Wednesday and expected to meet this Diana person who had apparently captured his attention. "Mom, I'm not sure that's a good idea," Dexter said, trying to imagine Diana meeting his mother's exacting standards. "Nonsense. If she's important to you, then she's important to me. I'll be at your office Wednesday at noon. Bring her to lunch. She owns a bakery. She can't just leave in the middle of the day. Then we'll have dinner. Wednesday at 7, that Italian place you like. Bring Diana." Eleanor hung up before he could argue further. Dexter called Diana immediately. "So my mother wants to meet you." There was a long pause. "Your mother? The society page regular, the woman who sits on the boards of 3 museums and basically runs the city's charity circuit." "That's the one." "Dexter, I'm going to throw up. You'll be fine. She's going to love you." How can you possibly know that? Because I love you, Dexter said, the words coming out before he had consciously decided to say them. And she'll see what I see. Another long pause. Did you just say you love me? Yes. Was that okay? Was that okay? Diana repeated, her voice strangled between laughter and tears. You're an idiot. Is that a yes or a no? It's an I love you too, you ridiculous man. But we're coming back to this conversation after I survive meeting your mother. Wednesday evening arrived too quickly. Dexter picked Diana up from her apartment, finding her wearing a simple black dress and looking absolutely terrified. I can't do this, she said. I'm going to say something stupid or spill something on her or forget how to use silverware. Let's just run away. We can move to Paris and you can give up being a CEO and we'll open a bakery together. Diana, breathe. I'm breathing. I'm just also panicking. Dexter pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. My mother has high standards, but she's also fair. And she's going to see what I see. A brilliant, talented, beautiful woman who makes her son happier than he's ever been. You're really good at the pep talk thing. I'm a CEO. It's literally part of my job description. Diana managed a shaky laugh and let him lead her to the car. Alina was already seated when they arrived at Marcello's, looking regal in a navy suit, her silver hair perfectly styled. She stood as they approached, her sharp eyes taking in every detail of Diana's appearance. Mother, Dexter said, kissing her cheek. This is Diana Ellis. Diana, my mother, Alina Thornton. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Thornton, Diana said, shaking Alina's hand with more confidence than Dexter knew she felt. Call me Alina, please, and the pleasure is mine. Dexter speaks very highly of you. She gestured for them to sit, her gaze never leaving Diana. I understand you own a bakery. Yes, madam, sweet and savory on Maple Street. We specialize in custom cakes and pastries. I'll have to visit. I'm always looking for new vendors for the charity events I organize. Alina picked up her menu, a gesture that somehow felt like a test passing. Dexter tells me you won a baking competition together. We did. Though honestly, I did most of the work. Dexter was still learning the difference between folding and stirring. Alina's lips twitched. That sounds like my son, brilliant in a boardroom, hopeless in a kitchen. I'm sitting right here, Dexter pointed out. We know, dear, his mother said. Diana, tell me about your bakery. How long have you been in business? What followed was the most nerve-wracking dinner of Diana's life. But by the end, even she had to admit it was going well. Alina asked pointed questions about the business, about Diana's background, about her plans for the future. But there was genuine interest behind the interrogation, and when Diana mentioned her expansion plans, Alina leaned forward with obvious curiosity. That's ambitious. Do you have the capital? I'm working on it. Saving aggressively, looking at small business loans. It's going to take time, but I'll get there. Alina glanced at Dexter. And my son hasn't offered to invest. He has, Diana said. I turned him down. Why? Diana met Alina's gaze steadily. Because I need to build this myself. I need to know that my success is mine, not something I got because I'm dating someone wealthy. Alina studied her for a long moment, then smiled. It was the first genuine smile she had given all evening. Good. I like you, Diana Ellis. You have principles and backbone. Those are rare qualities. The tension Diana had been holding all evening finally released. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I'm going to hold you to those principles. Alina turned to Dexter. Bring her to the gala next month. It's time she met the rest of the family. Mother, it's not a suggestion, Dexter. If this is serious and based on the way you look at her it clearly is, then she should meet everyone. Unless Diana has objections. All eyes turned to Diana, who looked slightly overwhelmed but determined. No objections. I'd be happy to come. After Alina left, Diana slumped in her chair and drained her wine glass. "I need another drink, or 5. "You were amazing," Dexter said, taking her hand. "She liked you." "How could you tell?" "Because from where I was sitting, it felt like I was being interviewed for a position in the CIA. She smiled at you. My mother doesn't smile at people she doesn't like." "Wonderful. Now I just have to survive meeting the rest of your family at a fancy gala where I'll be surrounded by people who probably think I'm a gold digger." "No one's going to think that." "Dexter, I'm a baker dating a billionaire. People are definitely going to think that." She squeezed his hand. "But I don't care what they think. I care about you, and if meeting your family is important, then I'll do it." He lifted her hand to his lips. "I love you. I love you too. Even if your mother terrifies me." The weeks leading up to the gala were busy. Diana threw herself into preparations for the expansion, meeting with contractors and suppliers, pricing equipment, and working longer hours at the bakery. Dexter helped where he could, reviewing contracts and offering advice, careful not to overstep the boundaries Diana had set. He was at the bakery early one Tuesday morning when Diana's accountant called with bad news. The loan she had applied for had been denied, the bank citing insufficient collateral and concerns about market saturation in the area. Diana took the call in the back office, and when she emerged, her face was carefully blank. She went right back to work, mixing batter and filling pans with mechanical efficiency. "Diana," Dexter said carefully, "talk to me. There's nothing to talk about. They said no, I'll apply somewhere else. Or you could let me help." Her hand stilled on the bowl. "Dexter, just listen. You don't have to take a loan from me. What if I helped you find alternative financing? I have contacts at venture capital firms, people who invest in small businesses exactly like yours. They'd give you better terms than a bank, and it would be a legitimate business transaction." Diana was quiet for a long moment. "You'd really do that? Just make introductions, nothing more, I promise. No money from me, just opening doors." She turned to face him, flour dusting her cheek as always. "Okay, thank you." Dexter made good on his promise, connecting Diana with 3 different investors who were interested in her expansion plans. She met with all of them, revised her business plan based on their feedback, and eventually accepted an offer from a small firm that specialized in food service businesses. The night she signed the contract, she showed up at Dexter's penthouse apartment unannounced, waving the papers triumphantly. "I did it," she said, throwing her arms around him. "I got the funding. We break ground on the expansion next month." Dexter lifted her off her feet, spinning her around in celebration. "I'm so proud of you. I couldn't have done it without your help, and before you say anything, I know you didn't give me money, but you opened doors I didn't know existed, and that matters just as much." She kissed him soundly. "Thank you for understanding what I needed. Always." The night of the gala arrived too quickly. Dexter picked Diana up from her apartment and nearly swallowed his tongue when she opened the door. She wore a floor-length emerald green gown that matched her eyes, her hair swept up in an elegant twist that revealed the graceful line of her neck. "You're staring," Diana said, self-conscious. "You're stunning." She blushed, smoothing down the dress. "Jessica helped me pick it out. She said I needed to look like I belonged." "Diana, you belong anywhere you want to be." Dexter offered his arm. "Ready? Absolutely not. Let's go anyway." The gala was held at the city's most prestigious hotel, the ballroom filled with the kind of people who appeared in society pages and donated wings to hospitals. Diana's hand tightened on Dexter's arm as they entered, her nerves obvious in the tension of her shoulders. Alina found them almost immediately, appearing in a silver gown with Dexter's father at her side. Richard Thornton was older than his wife, his hair completely white, but he still carried himself with the bearing of someone used to commanding attention. "Diana, wonderful to see you again," Eleanor said warmly. "This is my husband, Richard." "Mr. Thornton, it's a pleasure," Diana said, shaking his hand. Richard studied her with the same assessing gaze his wife had used. "So you're the young woman who's managed to civilize my son." "I didn't think it was possible, Dad," Dexter warned. "I'm teasing. It's good to meet you, Diana. Eleanor speaks highly of you, which is saying something." The evening was a blur of introductions. Dexter's extended family, his business partners, board members, and various society figures, all wanting to meet the woman who had captured his attention. Diana handled it with grace Dexter had not expected, answering questions about her bakery with confidence, and deflecting the more pointed inquiries about their relationship with humor. They were at the bar getting drinks when a woman Dexter vaguely recognized approached. She was blonde and polished, wearing diamonds that probably cost more than Diana's car. "Dexter, darling, I haven't seen you in ages," she said, air kissing his cheek. "Who's your friend?" "Diana Ellis. This is Vanessa Pierce. We went to business school together." "How nice," Vanessa said, her smile not reaching her eyes as she looked Diana up and down. "And what do you do, Diana?" "I own a bakery." "A bakery? How quaint." Vanessa turned her attention back to Dexter. "You must be so busy with the expansion, Dex. I've been following the news." "Impressive work." "Thank you. You know, we should have lunch sometime. Catch up, talk strategy. I've been consulting with several manufacturing firms recently, and I have some thoughts on your supply chain management." Diana's hand tightened on her glass, but her expression remained pleasant. Dexter recognized the territorial display for what it was and felt irritation spike through him. "I appreciate the offer, Vanessa, but my schedule is pretty full these days." He put his arm around Diana's waist, a clear signal. "Diana and I don't get enough time together as it is." Vanessa's smile turned brittle. "Of course. Well, it was lovely to meet you, Diana. Enjoy the evening." After she left, Diana let out a slow breath. "She seems nice. She's a shark. Always has been. She's also beautiful and successful and probably has an MBA from somewhere impressive." Dexter turned Diana to face him. "She's also not you, and I have zero interest in anyone who isn't you. Even when I'm covered in flour and smell like vanilla extract, especially then." Diana smiled, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "Take me dancing, Thornton. If I'm going to survive this night, I need a distraction." The dance floor was crowded, but Dexter led Diana into a waltz with surprising grace. She followed his lead easily, and for a few moments, they were able to forget the watching eyes and just be together. "You never told me you could dance," Diana said. "You never asked. My mother insisted I take lessons as a teenager. I hated every minute of it at the time. I'm glad you did. This is nice." "Yeah," Dexter agreed, pulling her closer. "It really is." They stayed at the gala until Eleanor declared it acceptable for them to leave, then escaped to Dexter's car with relief. Diana kicked off her heels in the passenger seat, groaning as she rubbed her feet. "Those shoes were torture devices," she complained. "Beautiful torture devices, but torture nonetheless. You survived. Barely. Your family is terrifying. Nice, but terrifying. Your Aunt Catherine cornered me for 20 minutes talking about proper tea service, and I still don't know if I was being tested or if she just really likes tea." "Probably both." Dexter reached over and took her hand. "Thank you for coming tonight. I know it wasn't easy." "Dexter, you sat through Thanksgiving dinner with my family last week, where my brother interrogated you about your intentions and my dad made you watch football for 4 hours. This was the least I could do." Thanksgiving had indeed been an experience. Diana's family lived in a small house in the suburbs, and the contrast to Dexter's upbringing could not have been more stark. but they had welcomed him with warmth and chaos, and her father had shaken his hand at the end of the night and told him he was good enough for his daughter, which felt like winning the lottery. "Your family is great," Dexter said honestly. "They liked you. My mom called me the next day to tell me you were a keeper." Diana squeezed his hand. "She's not wrong." The expansion of Sweet and Savory took 3 months. Diana worked herself to exhaustion overseeing every detail while still maintaining the daily operations of the bakery. Dexter helped where he could, showing up with coffee and lunch, taking her away for breaks when she refused to stop working, holding her when she cried from stress and frustration. The grand reopening was scheduled for a Saturday in March. Diana had been working for 36 hours straight making sure everything was perfect, and Dexter finally had to physically remove her from the bakery Friday night. "You need to sleep," he said firmly, ignoring her protests. "The opening is tomorrow, and you're going to collapse if you don't rest. But the display cases need to be restocked, and I haven't finished the Diana. Sleep. I'll come back early tomorrow and help with whatever still needs to be done. But right now, you need to trust that everything is ready." She looked around the transformed space, the gleaming new equipment, the expanded cafe area with its cozy tables and carefully chosen decorations. Her eyes filled with tears. "I did it," she whispered. "I actually did it." "You did it," Dexter confirmed, pulling her close. "And it's incredible. But it will still be incredible after you get some sleep." He took her back to his apartment because it was closer and put her to bed in his room. Diana was asleep within minutes, exhausted beyond measure. Dexter stayed up making calls and sending emails, ensuring that everything would go smoothly for the opening. At 5 in the morning, he woke Diana gently, presenting her with coffee and breakfast. Ready for the big day, Diana sat up, looking more rested despite the short sleep. "I'm terrified." "That's normal. What if no one comes? What if they come and hate it? What if I've made a huge mistake?" "Diana, you haven't made a mistake. You've created something beautiful, and people are going to love it, I promise." They arrived at the bakery at 6 to find a line already forming outside. Diana stopped short, staring at the people waiting. "What?" she started, then couldn't finish. Dexter smiled. "I may have mentioned the reopening to a few people, and Alina may have mentioned it to a few more people, and it may have been featured in the morning paper's food section." "Dexter Thornton, what did you do?" "I made sure people knew about the best bakery in the city. The rest is all you." The opening was a massive success. People flooded in, filling the cafe and exclaiming over the displays. Diana worked the crowd with natural warmth, remembering names and preferences, explaining her new menu items with infectious enthusiasm. Dexter stayed in the background, content to watch her shine. Alina showed up mid-morning with Richard and half a dozen society friends, all of whom ordered extensively and praised everything. Jessica arrived with flowers and champagne. Diana's parents drove in from the suburbs, her mother crying happy tears while her father looked around with obvious pride. By closing time, they had sold out of nearly everything. Diana locked the door behind the last customer and leaned against it, looking dazed. "We did it," she said to the empty bakery. "Holy shit, we actually did it." Dexter crossed to her and kissed her thoroughly. "You did it. This is all you." "Not all me, you helped. I just opened some doors, you did everything else." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I'm so proud of you, Diana, so incredibly proud." She kissed him again, deeper this time, pouring months of stress and fear and triumph into the contact. When they finally broke apart, she was crying and laughing at the same time. "I love you," she said fiercely. "I love you so much. I love you too." They stood in the quiet bakery, holding each other as evening light filtered through the windows, and Dexter felt a certainty settle in his chest. This woman, this brilliant, determined, passionate woman was his future. He had known it for months, but in this moment it became undeniable truth. "Marry me," he said. Diana pulled back to look at him. "What? Marry me?" "I know it's fast, and I don't have a ring, and this is probably the least romantic proposal in history. But I don't want to wait. I want to wake up with you every morning and help you bake croissants and argue about proper folding technique. I want to take you to Paris and watch you fall in love with every bakery we visit. I want to build a life with you, Diana. Will you marry me?" She was crying harder now, but her smile was radiant. "You're an idiot. Is that a yes?" "Yes, you impossible man. Yes, I'll marry you." Dexter kissed her again, and somewhere in the back of his mind, he noted that he needed to buy a ring, plan a proper proposal, do this right. But Diana was kissing him back like he had just given her everything she ever wanted, and he figured maybe he had. They were married 6 months later in a small ceremony at the orchard where they had had their first picnic. Diana wore a simple white dress and carried wildflowers. Dexter wore his best suit and could not stop smiling. Eleanor cried. Diana's mother cried. Even Richard looked suspiciously misty-eyed as Dexter slipped the ring onto Diana's finger, a custom-designed band that incorporated both their initials in an elegant pattern. "You're stuck with me now," Diana whispered as they were pronounced husband and wife. "Good," Dexter replied. "That's exactly what I want." The reception was held at Sweet and Savory, which Diana had insisted on. She had made their wedding cake herself, a towering creation that incorporated elements from their winning bake-off dessert. It was perfect, just like everything else about the day. They honeymooned in Paris, spending 2 weeks visiting bakeries and patisseries, eating their weight in pastries, and falling even more in love with each other. Diana took 1,000,000 photos and pages of notes, already planning new recipes to try at the bakery. "I'm never going to get you to relax, am I?" Dexter asked one morning as they sat in a tiny cafe near Notre Dame. Diana looked up from her notebook. "Would you really want me any other way?" "Not for a second." They returned home to find that Sweet and Savory had been featured in a national food magazine. And suddenly, Diana was fielding calls for interviews and partnership opportunities. She handled the attention with characteristic grace, never losing sight of what had made her successful in the first place. Dexter stepped back from some of his responsibilities at Thornton Industries, promoting trusted executives and delegating more than he ever had before. He started leaving work at reasonable hours, spending evenings with Diana, taking actual weekends off. His board was concerned at first, but the company continued to thrive, and eventually they accepted that their CEO had a life outside the office. 2 years after their wedding, Diana told him she was pregnant. They were in the bakery, early morning light streaming through the windows, and Dexter's hands shook as he pulled her close. "Are you sure?" he asked. 3 tests worth of sure. "We're having a baby, Dexter." He kissed her, overwhelmed with joy and terror and love. "I don't know how to be a father. Good thing we have 9 months to figure it out together." Their daughter was born on a snowy February morning, tiny and perfect with Diana's green eyes and Dexter's dark hair. They named her Eleanor Grace, after Dexter's mother and Diana's grandmother. Watching Diana with their daughter, seeing her patience and love, and the way she lit up whenever Eleanor smiled, Dexter fell in love with her all over again. She was an incredible mother, managing to balance the bakery and their family with the same determination she brought to everything. On Eleanor's first birthday, they threw a party at the bakery. Diana made an elaborate cake decorated like a flower garden, and Eleanor smashed her face into it with enthusiastic joy while everyone laughed and took pictures. "Can you believe it's been 3 years since the bake-off?" Diana asked that night, curled up next to Dexter on the couch while Alina slept in her crib. Best charity event I ever attended, even with the flower incident, especially with the flower incident. Dexter kissed her temple. That flower stain was the best thing that ever happened to me. Diana laughed softly. You're such a sap. Only for you. They sat in comfortable silence, the life they had built together wrapped around them like a warm blanket. Diana's hand found his, their fingers lacing together with practiced ease, and Dexter thought about how far they had come from that community center bake-off. He had been a workaholic CEO with no life outside his company. She had been a determined baker with big dreams and flour in her hair. Together, they had become something neither could have imagined alone, something beautiful and real and lasting. "What are you thinking about?" Diana asked, her voice soft in the quiet room. "How lucky I am. How much I love you. How glad I am that my assistant signed me up for that bake-off. I should send Rebecca a thank-you gift. We should send her a lifetime supply of croissants." Diana smiled against his shoulder. "Deal." Years continued to pass in a blur of happiness. Sweet and Savory expanded again, opening a second location across town. Diana hired a manager to run the day-to-day operations, giving herself more time with Alina. Dexter continued to step back from Thornton Industries, eventually transitioning to chairman of the board and letting younger leadership take over the CEO position. They had a son 3 years after Alina, a rambunctious boy they named James after Diana's grandfather. Their home was always full of laughter and noise, and the sweet smell of whatever Diana was testing for the bakery. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Dexter surprised Diana with tickets to Paris. They left the kids with Alina and Richard and spent 2 weeks retracing their honeymoon steps, visiting old haunts and discovering new ones. "You ever regret it?" Diana asked one evening as they walked along the Seine. "Stepping back from the company, I know how much it meant to you." Dexter stopped walking and turned to face her, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. "I've never regretted it for a second. The company was what I did, Diana. You and the kids are who I am. There's no comparison." She kissed him there on the bridge, tourists flowing around them, and Dexter was reminded of standing in a community center kitchen, watching this woman take a bake-off more seriously than anyone had a right to, and feeling something shift in his chest. "I love you," Diana said against his lips. "Still, always." "Still and always," Dexter agreed. They returned home to chaos, Alina and James launching themselves at their parents with the enthusiasm only children could manage. Diana scooped them both up, laughing as James tried to tell her about every single thing that had happened while they were gone. Dexter stood back and watched his family, his heart full to bursting. This was the life he had built. Not through business deals and corporate mergers, not through wealth and success and industry dominance, but through taking a chance on a bake-off, through flour stains and apple tarts and a woman who took everything seriously, including love. Years later, when Alina was in college and James was in high school, Dexter and Diana sat in Sweet and Savory early one Sunday morning. The bakery was closed, just the two of them and coffee and the pastries Diana had made out of habit. "Remember when you assaulted me with flour?" Dexter asked. Diana laughed. "I'll never live that down, will I? Never. It's my favorite story to tell at parties. Our kids are so embarrassed by us, as they should be. We're disgustingly happy." Diana reached across the table and took his hand. "We really are, aren't we?" Dexter looked at his wife, her hair now showing threads of gray, laugh lines crinkling around her eyes, flour still somehow managing to find its way onto her cheek. She was even more beautiful than the day he met her, if such a thing were possible. "Yeah," he said simply. "We really are." They sat in the quiet bakery, the early morning sun streaming through the windows, and Dexter thought about the unexpected turns life could take. How a mandatory charity event could lead to everything that mattered. How a woman who took baking competitions too seriously could teach him what it meant to be truly alive. He had been attracted to her fierce dedication that first day, watching her organize ingredients with military precision, seeing her total commitment to something as simple as a bake-off. But attraction had evolved into love, love into partnership, partnership into a life richer than anything he could have imagined. "What should we bake today?" Diana asked, her eyes sparkling with the same enthusiasm she had shown that first morning in the community center. "Whatever you want," Dexter said, standing and pulling her to her feet. "I'm just here to follow orders. Liar, you've gotten pretty good at this over the years." "I had a great teacher." They moved into the kitchen together, falling into the rhythm they had perfected over decades. Diana pulled out ingredients while Dexter preheated ovens. She measured while he mixed. They worked side by side, occasionally bumping hips or stealing kisses, completely comfortable in the dance of their partnership. This was their love story. Not grand gestures or dramatic moments, though they had those too. But mostly it was this: flour and sugar and the quiet joy of building something together. Of finding someone who brought out the best in you, who made you want to be better, who looked at you covered in flour and saw your whole heart. Dexter Thornton had been a CEO who thought he had everything figured out until Diana Ellis proved him wrong. She had taken a bake-off seriously, and he had fallen completely, irrevocably in love, and every day since had been the best decision he ever made.